There is a moment in your inner evolution when something inside you begins to feel unfamiliar. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with loud signs. It appears quietly like a subtle shift in the atmosphere of your inner world. You sense that something in you no longer fits the way it used to. The thoughts you once believed without question now feel distant. The roles you played begin to feel heavier. The emotions you carried for years no longer sit in the same place. You cannot explain it, yet the feeling is undeniable. This is the first sign that the old identity is starting to crack. You may notice this shift during an ordinary moment. You pause in the middle of a familiar routine and feel that the person performing the action is not entirely you anymore. You sense a space forming between who you have been and who you are becoming. This space feels strange at first. It feels like uncertainty, like the ground beneath your inner world is adjusting to a new shape. You might try to ignore it, but it follows you quietly. It reflects itself in your thoughts, in your choices, and in the way you respond to life. The truth is that identity is not a fixed structure. It is a collection of patterns held together by belief and repetition. For years, you lived inside these patterns as if they defined the totality of who you are. You wore them like familiar clothing, even when they no longer matched the person you were becoming. When the moment arrives that the old structure begins to fracture, you feel a subtle disorientation. It is the first indication that your consciousness is expanding beyond the limits of the identity you built. This cracking does not mean you are breaking down. It means you are breaking open. The identity you constructed was shaped by old experiences, old assumptions, and old interpretations of who you were supposed to be. When your awareness grows beyond those interpretations, the identity cannot hold itself together in the same way. It begins to loosen. It begins to shift. It begins to reveal the space behind it. This is the beginning of a deeper awakening. You might notice that certain habits feel less automatic. Patterns that once repeated effortlessly begin to feel out of alignment. Emotional reactions that once defined you lose their intensity. You see yourself responding differently, not because you are forcing a new behavior, but because the old one no longer arises with the same energy. This is the natural consequence of identity beginning to dissolve. The old self is losing its grip, not through effort, but through awareness. As this shift unfolds, you may experience moments of clarity that feel like glimpses into a new version of yourself. These moments appear unexpectedly. You feel a sense of expanded understanding as if you are perceiving life from a higher vantage point. Then the clarity fades, and you return temporarily to the familiar patterns. But you do not return fully. Something inside you has changed. You have seen through the cracks in your old identity, and the vision cannot be forgotten. There is often a quiet discomfort during this phase. You may feel unsettled without knowing why. You may feel as if you are standing between two versions of yourself, neither fully old nor fully new. This discomfort is not a sign of misalignment. It is a sign of transformation. The identity that once felt solid is becoming transparent. The structure that once defined your decisions is weakening. You are beginning to feel the space that exists beneath your patterns, and this space can feel unfamiliar until you learn to trust it. The old identity does not collapse all at once. It weakens gently, layer by layer. The first cracks appear in your thoughts, in your emotional responses, and in the story you tell yourself about who you are. As awareness increases, the cracks widen. You begin to sense that the person you believed yourself to be is not the full truth. You begin to sense that something deeper has always been present behind the surface of your personality. This deeper presence is awareness itself. The moment the old identity begins to crack is not the end of anything real. It is the beginning of the end of what is false. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding the layer that was never truly you. When this cracking begins, your reality starts to shift because your perception is no longer defined by the old patterns. A new level of consciousness is emerging, and it is preparing you for the transformation that follows. The illusion of a stable self. For most of your life, you believed that who you are is something solid. You believed that your personality, your preferences, your emotional patterns, and your internal narrative formed a stable structure called you. This belief created the illusion of continuity. It made you feel grounded in a sense of identity that seemed reliable. Yet when you look closely, you begin to see that this stability was never real. It was a mental construction, held together by memory, repetition, and the mind's desire for certainty. Identity feels stable only because the mind organizes your experiences into a coherent story. It selects moments from your past, arranges them into patterns, and presents the result as your fixed self. It says this is who you are because this is who you have been. But if you observe carefully, you will notice that the story shifts depending on your mood. your circumstances, and the thoughts that arise in a given moment. The self that the mind tries to protect is not a solid entity. It is a dynamic narrative constantly being rewritten inside your awareness. The illusion of a stable self forms early in life. As you grow, you learn to define yourself through feedback from others. You adopt roles based on expectations. You internalize beliefs from family, culture, and past experiences. These influences shape your behavior and crystallize into what you call your identity. Yet none of these elements are inherently you. They are layers added to your consciousness, layers that you accepted because they gave structure to your sense of existence. The mind holds onto these layers because it fears uncertainty. A fluid identity feels dangerous to the mind because it threatens the continuity it depends on. So the mind repeats thoughts, reenacts emotional patterns, and reinforces familiar reactions to maintain a sense of self. It builds a structure that appears stable, even though it is made from memories and assumptions rather than truth. This is the foundation of the illusion. When the identity begins to dissolve, you start to see how fragile this structure really is. You notice how quickly your sense of self changes based on new insights or emotional shifts. You notice how easily old beliefs lose their meaning once you question them. You see how many of your reactions were learned rather than chosen. Each realization weakens the illusion of stability. You begin to understand that identity is not a fixed truth. It is a temporary configuration of consciousness. The mind resists this understanding. It prefers definitions. It prefers labels. It prefers consistency, even if that consistency limits your growth. The mind believes that without a stable identity, you would lose your orientation in the world. But the deeper truth is that you were never the identity to begin with. You were the awareness underneath it, observing every thought, emotion, and narrative that the mind used to build its sense of self. This awareness does not change. It is constant. It is not shaped by memory. It does not depend on belief. It simply is. When you begin to identify more with this awareness than with the constructed self, the illusion of stability becomes visible. You see that the self you believed in was made of interpretations of the past, not the reality of the present. You see that your identity was built from old versions of you, versions that no longer match who you are becoming. This shift can feel unsettling at first. When the familiar structure dissolves, the mind reacts with confusion. It asks questions like, who am I without these patterns? What will remain if I let this identity collapse? These questions arise from fear, not truth. The truth is that letting go of the constructed identity does not lead to emptiness. It leads to clarity. When the layers fall away, what remains is the awareness that has always been present behind every experience. As you see through the illusion, you begin to notice how often the mind uses identity to justify its reactions. It says, this is just who I am. It says I always react like this. It says I cannot change because this is my nature. But these statements are not reflections of your true self. They are reflections of a conditioned identity that has repeated itself for so long that it began to feel permanent. When you stop identifying with these patterns, they lose their authority. You begin to see that your identity was never as stable as you believed. It was flexible, fluid, and constantly changing beneath the surface. The only thing that made it seem solid was your attachment to it. When you release that attachment, the space behind your identity begins to open. This opening is the beginning of transformation. It is the doorway to a deeper version of you, a version not confined by the patterns of the past. Seeing through the illusion of a stable self is one of the most important stages in the collapse of identity. It reveals that your true nature is not defined by the stories your mind tells. It is not defined by your past. It is not defined by your emotional conditioning. It is defined by awareness itself. Awareness is fluid and expansive. It can hold any identity without being limited by it. When you understand this, the process of identity collapse becomes less frightening. You no longer cling to the old patterns because you recognize they were never truly you. You allow the old structure to dissolve because you see that something deeper is emerging. This deeper presence is not a new identity. It is the realization that your essence is beyond identity. It is the awareness watching the self dissolve. The energetic tension before a shift. Before a major shift in your reality, there is an energetic tension that builds within you. It is not the kind of tension you feel in your muscles or in your daily stress. It is a deeper sensation, one that arises in the space behind your thoughts. It feels like something inside you is preparing to change, yet you cannot identify what that change will be. This tension signals that the old identity is losing its foundation. The structure that once held your sense of self is becoming unstable, and your awareness is beginning to move beyond it. You might feel this tension as restlessness. You sense that the way you have been living no longer matches the person you are becoming. You may not know exactly what is shifting, but you feel the misalignment growing. Old habits begin to feel heavier. Old beliefs feel outdated. Old emotional reactions feel unnecessary. Even routines that once felt comfortable now carry a subtle sense of resistance. This resistance is not a problem. It is the friction created when the old identity tries to hold on while your awareness expands. Sometimes this tension appears as confusion. You sense a change coming but cannot articulate it. You feel caught between what is familiar and what is emerging. The mind tries to understand the process, but it cannot grasp what lies beyond its patterns. This is why the tension increases. The mind feels the shift yet cannot control it. Awareness is moving ahead of thought, and the identity that the mind built is beginning to collapse under its own weight. You may also feel emotional waves that appear without explanation. Emotions rise more intensely or seem to surface from nowhere. These emotions are not regressions. They are pressure points within the identity structure. As the identity weakens, unresolved emotional patterns begin to release. They rise so they can be seen. They rise so they can lose their hold. This emotional movement is part of the preparation for the shift. Your system is clearing space for a new level of perception. There is also a sense of internal stretching. You feel pulled between the old and the new. It is as if one part of you is holding on to the familiar patterns, while another part is calling you forward. This stretching creates a sense of instability. You may feel that you are not fully rooted in the person you were, yet not fully anchored in who you are becoming. This is the threshold between identities. It is where transformation gathers its strength. As the tension grows, your awareness becomes sharper. You begin to see patterns you once lived inside unconsciously. You notice how often your reactions come from habit rather than presence. You notice how your thoughts repeat stories that no longer feel true. You notice how the expectations of others shaped your actions. This increase in clarity is not random. It is part of the shift. Awareness rises when identity weakens. The more the old structure cracks, the more light enters through the fractures. The mind may interpret this period as instability or imbalance. It wants certainty. It wants to understand. It wants to hold on to what it knows. But the energetic tension is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is awakening. The old identity cannot stay intact because you are outgrowing it. The patterns that once defined you cannot survive in the presence of expanded awareness. The tension is the mind's response to the dissolution it cannot prevent. During this phase, you might feel drawn inward. Noise from the outside world becomes less engaging. You prefer silence or introspection. You feel a natural desire to step back from distractions. This is because your inner world is reorganizing itself. The collapse of identity requires space. It requires presence. It requires a slowing down of the old patterns so the new perception can begin to form. You are not withdrawing from life. You are aligning with the deeper movement happening within you. There's also a subtle sense of anticipation. You cannot explain it, yet you feel that something significant is approaching. This anticipation is not based on hope or expectation. It is an intuitive recognition that your inner state is shifting. You feel that the way you see yourself and the world is about to transform. You feel that the identity you once held is no longer capable of supporting your growth. This anticipation is awareness recognizing its own expansion. The tension before the shift is necessary. It creates the pressure that breaks the old identity. It brings to the surface everything that cannot move with you into the next phase of your evolution. It highlights the patterns that no longer serve you. It dissolves the illusions that once shaped your perception. Without this pressure, the old structure would remain intact. The shift would not occur. What you are feeling in this phase is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough forming in silence. The identity that once felt solid is losing its grip. The mind that once narrated your reality is losing its authority. Awareness is rising to take its place. This rising creates tension because you are being pulled out of the familiar and into the unknown. But the unknown is not empty. It is where your new reality begins to gather its form. As the energetic tension builds, trust that something deeper is opening within you. You are not losing stability. You are shedding the structure that kept you confined. You are stepping into a truer version of yourself. The shift is already in motion. The old identity can feel it, and so can you. The breaking point, when your old identity no longer fits. There comes a moment in your inner transformation when the tension between who you have been and who you are becoming reaches its peak. This moment is not dramatic on the outside, but on the inside it feels like a profound shift. It is the breaking point. It is the point at which the identity you once lived inside can no longer support your expanding awareness. The structure begins to collapse because it is too small to contain who you are now. At this stage, the old identity becomes uncomfortable. You feel it in your thoughts, in your emotions, in your choices, and even in your physical presence. Behaviors that once felt natural now feel forced. Roles you used to play no longer make sense. The expectations you once followed lose their authority. You begin to feel out of place inside your own patterns. This discomfort is not a failure. It is the signal that you are outgrowing what once defined you. The mind tries to hold on during this breaking point. It attempts to pull you back into familiarity. It repeats old stories that used to feel true. It tries to convince you that the discomfort is a sign to return to the old ways. But something in you has already moved beyond that. You feel that the story is no longer believable. You sense that the old structure is too limited. The gap between your awareness and your identity has grown too wide to ignore. This is the turning point. The breaking point often brings a sense of emotional intensity. You may feel waves of frustration, sadness, confusion, or even unexpected relief. These emotions arise because the old identity is dissolving, and the mind interprets the loss as a threat. It does not realize that you are not losing anything essential. You are releasing what no longer resonates with your evolving inner truth. The emotions surface to loosen the remaining attachments. They appear so that they can be released. As the breaking point unfolds, you begin to witness your inner world with greater clarity. You notice how much of your identity was shaped by fear. You see how often you made choices to avoid discomfort rather than to express authenticity. You see how many of your beliefs were inherited rather than consciously chosen. This level of clarity is a hallmark of the breaking point. Awareness rises so deeply that the illusions of identity cannot remain intact. One of the most powerful signs of the breaking point is the recognition that certain thoughts no longer represent you. They appear in your mind, yet you feel detached from them. You hear the familiar narrative, but it does not resonate with your inner truth. This detachment is not dissociation. It is awareness recognizing that you are not the patterns you once believed you were. The old identity loses its sense of ownership over your thoughts. It begins to collapse under the weight of your expansion. Another sign is the shift in your relationship. You start to see dynamics that once felt normal with new understanding. You recognize patterns that have been repeating for years. You feel drawn to truth rather than comfort. You may set boundaries more naturally or pull away from situations that no longer align with your evolution. This is not rebellion. It is alignment with your deeper self. At the breaking point, your inner world demands coherence. Anything that contradicts your truth becomes difficult to maintain. During this phase, you may feel a growing sense of emptiness. This emptiness is often misunderstood as a problem, but it is actually space being created for the new identity to emerge. The old patterns have loosened, but the new perspective has not yet taken full shape. You are in the in-between. You are standing in the space where the old no longer holds and the new has not fully formed. This emptiness is necessary. It allows you to release attachments without replacing them prematurely. The breaking point also brings an undeniable inner knowing. You feel that something irreversible is happening. You sense that returning to the old self is no longer possible. Even if you try to fit back into old patterns, they feel unnatural. You cannot unsee what awareness has revealed. You cannot pretend that the old identity still fits. This knowing is what anchors you during the collapse. It gives you the strength to move through the dissolution with presence. In this stage, your reality begins to shift in subtle yet profound ways. You may find that certain opportunities close while new ones open. People who were once central to your life may drift away. New connections may appear unexpectedly. Your inner state influences your outer world. As the identity collapses, your reality reorganizes itself around the expanding awareness. Life begins to reflect the shift happening within you. Although the breaking point can feel like a threshold of uncertainty, it is also a threshold of liberation. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding the version of yourself that was shaped by the limitations of your past. You are releasing the identity that was built from fear, conditioning, and unconscious patterns. What remains is the truth of who you are beneath all the layers. This stage is not about creating a new identity. It is about recognizing the awareness that exists beyond identity. When the old structure collapses, the mind no longer defines your sense of self. You begin to sense a deeper presence within you. This presence does not need validation. It does not seek approval. It does not cling to patterns. It simply is. It is the foundation upon which your new reality will be formed. The breaking point is the moment when the old identity can no longer hold itself together. It fractures under the pressure of your expanding consciousness. It loses its authority because you no longer believe in its stories. This moment marks the beginning of freedom. Once the identity collapses, you step into a space of openness where a new way of seeing, living, and being becomes possible. The breaking point is not the end. It is the release that allows everything new to begin. The collapse itself, what actually falls apart. When the identity finally reaches its breaking point, the collapse begins. This collapse is not destructive in the way the mind imagines. It is not chaos or loss of control. It is a quiet unraveling, a soft dissolution. What falls apart is not you, but the structure that once defined who you believed you were. It is the collapse of illusions, not the collapse of your essence. And in this collapse, something deeper begins to emerge. The first thing that falls apart is the old narrative. The story you carried about yourself loses its authority. The beliefs you repeated for years begin to feel unconvincing. The labels you used to define yourself lose their weight. You sense that the story no longer describes you. It feels outdated, too small for the consciousness you are stepping into. As this narrative collapses, you feel a spaciousness forming within you. You begin to exist beyond the story. Next, the emotional patterns that once shaped your reactions begin to weaken. These patterns were built from past experiences and conditioned responses. They repeated themselves so consistently that they felt like part of your identity. When the collapse begins, these emotional loops lose their momentum. You notice that certain triggers no longer create the same intensity. You observe emotions rising and falling without becoming entangled in them. This detachment is not numbness. It is clarity. It is awareness freeing itself from old emotional conditioning. The collapse also affects your thoughts. You start to see how much of your thinking was automatic rather than intentional. Thoughts that once felt meaningful now appear as repetitive patterns. You become aware of how often the mind recreated the past and projected imagined futures. As awareness expands, the mind loses its ability to dominate your experience. Thought becomes something you observe rather than something you obey. This shift marks a profound transformation. When thought loses authority, the old identity cannot sustain itself. Another part of the collapse is the dissolution of roles. You spent years living inside roles given to you by your environment, your relationships, and your culture. These roles shaped how you behaved and how you were perceived. But as identity collapses, the attachment to these roles fades. You may still perform certain responsibilities, but you no longer define yourself by them. You no longer feel the need to meet expectations that do not align with your truth. This freedom feels both unfamiliar and deeply authentic. Relationships also shift during the collapse. Some connections feel more distant as your inner world changes. People who resonated with your old identity may feel misaligned with the person you are becoming. This is not rejection. It is natural movement. As the old self dissolves, your resonance changes. You may find that conversations, dynamics, and shared patterns no longer hold meaning. At the same time, new relationships may appear. These connections feel more aligned with your expanding awareness. They reflect the truth emerging within you. The collapse often reveals how much of your identity was constructed to avoid discomfort. You see how you created behaviors to protect yourself from pain or rejection. You see how you shaped your personality around the need for approval. When these protective patterns fall apart, the rawness beneath them becomes visible. This rawness is not weakness. It is the beginning of authenticity. It is the part of you that existed before the conditioning. When you allow it to be seen, a deeper sense of self emerges. One of the most significant aspects of the collapse is the dissolution of control. The old identity was built on the belief that control was necessary for safety. It tried to manage outcomes, predict the future, and guard against uncertainty. But as awareness grows, the illusion of control crumbles. You realize that much of life unfolds beyond the mind's ability to predict. This realization is liberating. When control dissolves, presence becomes your foundation. You begin to trust something deeper than the mind. During the collapse, a sense of emptiness often appears. This emptiness is misunderstood when seen from the perspective of the old identity. The mind interprets it as loss or void. But from the perspective of awareness, this emptiness is spaciousness. It is the clearing of old patterns. It is the silence in which a new perception emerges. Within this emptiness, you begin to sense your true essence. You begin to feel the presence that exists beneath all identities. Another powerful part of the collapse is the recognition that you were never the identity to begin with. You realize that the self you defended, protected, and maintained for years was a construct. It was a temporary set of patterns held together by belief. When the collapse shows you this truth, you may feel both relief and astonishment. Relief because you are no longer confined by the structure. Astonishment because you see how deeply you identified with something that was never truly you. As the collapse continues, life around you begins to mirror the change. Circumstances shift. Paths close and others open. Opportunities arise that match the new state of awareness. The external world reorganizes itself around the internal transformation. This reorganization is not forced. It unfolds naturally. When the inner structure dissolves, the outer reality adjusts. You begin to attract situations that align with your new level of consciousness. The collapse of identity is not an ending. It is a transition. What falls apart are the layers that obscured your awareness. What remains is the essence that has always been present. This essence is not fragmented. It is whole. It is not defined by thought or memory. It is the awareness that observes all experience. When the old identity dissolves, this awareness becomes more visible. It becomes the center of your perception. The collapse itself is not something you control. It is something you allow. The more you resist, the more tension you feel. The more you surrender, the more natural the process becomes. This collapse is the clearing of old structures so that a new reality can emerge. It is the moment when everything you thought you were dissolves, allowing you to recognize who you have always been. The collapse is not destruction, it is revelation. It is the unveiling of your true nature, the transition phase between who you were and who you are becoming. After the identity collapses, you enter a phase that feels unlike anything you have experienced before. It is not the old self, and it is not yet the new expression of your awareness. It is the space between identities. It is the threshold. It is the transition phase, and it carries a unique atmosphere. Nothing feels fully defined, yet everything feels open. You sense movement within you, but the direction is not entirely clear. This phase is essential, because it is where the new reality begins to form itself around your expanding consciousness. In this phase, the familiar patterns of the old self no longer arise with the same intensity. The emotional habits that once controlled your responses have loosened their grip. The thoughts that once repeated endlessly have lost their momentum. You feel lighter in some ways, yet uncertain in others. This uncertainty is not a sign of misalignment. It is a sign that you are standing in the space between structures, where the old has dissolved and the new has not yet taken shape. This in-between state brings a sense of quietness. You may find yourself naturally withdrawing from noise, distraction, and unnecessary stimulation. Silence feels inviting, even comforting. It is in this silence that you begin to sense your new direction. The transition phase is not about filling the space with new beliefs or behaviors. It is about allowing the space to remain open long enough for your deeper nature to reveal itself. The more you allow this openness, the more clearly you begin to feel the subtle pull of your emerging self. During this phase, your external reality may feel unfamiliar. Certain relationships shift. Situations that once felt stable may change unexpectedly. Opportunities that seemed aligned may fall away. This is not life working against you. It is life reorganizing itself to match your new level of awareness. When your inner structure changes, your outer world must adjust to support the emerging version of you. This adjustment can feel disorienting, but it is part of the transition. There is often a sense of emptiness that accompanies this phase. The mind may interpret this emptiness as something missing, but in truth, nothing is missing. The emptiness is space. It is the clearing that allows a deeper version of yourself to take form. When you no longer define yourself by the old identity, you stand in a pure field of possibility. This can feel unsettling, because the mind is accustomed to structure, but awareness thrives in openness. In this phase, you are learning to trust the openness rather than fear it. The transition phase also reveals how much of your life was shaped by unconscious patterns. You begin to notice how often you acted from habit rather than intention. You see how your old identity influenced your decisions, even when they were not aligned with your inner truth. As these realizations surface, you begin to make choices from a place of clarity rather than conditioning. You act with presence rather than repetition. This shift marks the beginning of your emerging identity taking shape. You may feel moments of deep peace in this phase. These moments arise when you rest in awareness rather than in thought. You feel a sense of spaciousness within you, as if your consciousness is expanding beyond the boundaries of your previous identity. These moments do not need explanation. They are glimpses of your true nature. They are reminders that beneath the identity, beneath the collapse, beneath the transition, there is a stable presence that has always been you. At times, the transition phase brings waves of uncertainty. You may question your path. You may wonder what comes next. You may feel as if you are suspended between two worlds. This is natural. You are learning to navigate life without the old identity guiding you. You are learning to trust awareness rather than patterns. This trust grows gradually. It develops through presence, through observation, and through allowing the process to unfold without forcing direction. This is also the phase where new desires begin to rise. Not desires driven by ego or lack, but desires that emerge from a deeper sense of alignment. You feel drawn to certain experiences, people, or paths without knowing why. These impulses are not random. They are signals from your expanding awareness. They point toward the reality that is forming around you. The more you listen to these subtle impulses, the more easily the new identity takes shape. In the transition phase, you begin to sense that your old definition of self is no longer relevant. You feel less confined by labels. You feel less attached to past narratives. You feel less influenced by the expectations of others. There is a sense of liberation in this. You begin to see that your identity is not something fixed, but something fluid, something shaped by awareness rather than memory. This understanding creates a quiet confidence within you. You also begin to feel a deeper connection with life. You notice synchronicities more often. You sense meaningful patterns in ordinary events. Your intuition becomes clearer. These experiences are signs that your inner and outer worlds are becoming aligned. As your identity collapses and your awareness expands, you move into coherence with the deeper field of reality. This coherence brings a sense of guidance that was not present before. The transition phase is not permanent, but it is essential. It prepares you for the emergence of your new identity. It clears away the remnants of your old structure. It reveals the space in which your new reality will take form. It teaches you to trust awareness rather than cling to familiar patterns. It invites you to step into life with openness rather than certainty. In this in-between space, you are neither who you were nor who you will become. You are the awareness that watches both dissolve and emerge. This awareness is the foundation of your transformation. It is the presence that carries you through the collapse and into the new reality forming within and around you. The emergence. When a new reality forms around you, there comes a moment after the collapse and the transition when you begin to feel something new rising from within you. It is subtle at first, like the faint glow of dawn before the sun becomes visible. You sense clarity where there once was confusion. You feel alignment where there once was resistance. You notice a quieter inner world that does not depend on old patterns to define itself. This is the emergence. It is the stage in which your new identity begins to form, not as a replacement for the old one, but as an expression of your expanded awareness. During emergence, your thoughts feel different. They become clearer, more spacious, and less entangled with fear or habit. You no longer feel the need to repeat old narratives to understand yourself. Thought becomes a tool rather than a master. You think when necessary, but you are no longer carried away by the momentum of the mind. You recognize that awareness exists before thought, and this recognition changes your relationship with your inner world. Your emotions also feel different. They rise and fall without controlling you. You observe them with presence rather than identification. You no longer feel defined by emotional waves. Instead, you feel rooted in something deeper, something stable and quiet. Even when emotions become intense, you sense a clear space beneath them that remains untouched. This inner stability marks the emergence of a new way of being. In this phase, your sense of self feels lighter. You do not cling to identities the way you once did. You no longer shape your decisions to meet old expectations. You respond to life with more authenticity because your inner world is no longer bound by past definitions. You feel free to express yourself without the weight of the old identity. This freedom is not rebellion. It is alignment with the truth of who you are now. As the new identity emerges, you begin to notice changes in your external reality. You attract different opportunities. You meet people who resonate with your expanded awareness. You feel drawn to experiences that reflect your inner transformation. Life seems to open new pathways that were invisible before. These shifts are not coincidences. They are reflections of your new state of consciousness. When your inner world changes, the outer world reorganizes itself to match it. You may also become aware of a deeper sense of intuition. You feel guided without needing to understand why. You sense subtle impulses that lead you in the right direction. This intuition does not come from the mind. It comes from awareness itself. It arises from the part of you that is connected to the deeper field of reality. As your identity dissolves and your awareness expands, this intuitive connection becomes stronger and clearer. In the emergence phase, your relationship with uncertainty transforms. What once felt threatening now feels spacious. You no longer cling to fixed outcomes. You no longer fear the unknown. You understand that awareness can meet any experience with clarity. This confidence does not come from control. It comes from presence. It comes from knowing that you are not the identity that once held fear. You are the awareness that remains unchanged through every transition. This new identity that forms is not rigid. It is fluid and adaptable. It reflects your deeper values and your authentic nature. It evolves as you evolve. It is not built on past conditioning, but on present awareness. This identity does not confine you. It supports your expansion. It allows you to engage with the world without losing yourself in old patterns. You feel grounded not in who you were, but in who you are becoming. You begin to recognize that this emergence is not a final stage. It is the beginning of a new cycle. Awareness will continue to expand. Identity will continue to shift. Reality will continue to respond to your inner evolution. You are stepping into a life shaped not by unconscious patterns, but by conscious presence. This shift marks a fundamental change in how you experience existence. The most powerful realization in this phase is the recognition that you were never the identity that collapsed. You were the awareness watching the identity appear and disappear. You were the consciousness observing every shift, every illusion, every moment of clarity. When the old identity dissolved, awareness remained. When the new identity emerged, awareness remained. This awareness is who you truly are. The rest is expression. As your new reality forms around you, you begin to understand life from a different perspective. You see that each moment is shaped by your inner state. You see that reality is not fixed, but responsive. You see that your consciousness participates in the creation of your experience. This understanding brings a sense of empowerment, not as control, but as alignment. Emergence is the moment when everything inside you reorganizes around the truth of your being. It is the moment when the old falls away and the new rises from within. It is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of a more authentic one. You are no longer living as the identity shaped by the past. You are living as the awareness that is free to grow, expand, and create a reality that reflects your evolving truth. This is the state in which your new reality begins to form around you, not from force, not from effort, but from presence, from awareness, from the recognition of who you truly are beneath every identity that comes and goes. If this message resonated with you, subscribe now to stay connected with the energy that awakens you. Like this video to anchor this frequency in your field. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a transmission that your spirit needs. And comment below, I am the frequency. Let the universe hear your voice. You're not here by chance. You're here to rise and remember who you truly are.